Hey everyone. In this episode, I got a chance to sit down with Michael Roberts, head of demand gen over at CloudApp. Michael's a pro at identifying worthwhile content and driving new demand for their business. We chatted about things like establishing trust as a brand and the steps that he took to focus their content strategy so that they could niche down and build a more sustainable pipeline. Michael also shared his thoughts on simplifying marketing attribution, as well as the attribution model that he actually built himself just here recently. So he's going to share that a little bit with us, and then also just talking about his own career path as he came up through a different track in marketing ops. So there's a lot in this one. Let's get into it. So, Michael, it's great having you on the show.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah. So, it's funny. We tried to do this actually, a couple of weeks ago, and we had some technical difficulties. So I'm glad we were able to get it scheduled again. So, again, I think, sorry to make you do this again, but maybe for the audience that has maybe never heard of Cloud App, or some of the things that you're doing right now within demand gen, maybe just give everybody a little bit of intro and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the head of demand generation at CloudApp. So I've been here for 3 years. CloudApp is a screen recording video messaging tool. So we're built on clarity, flexibility, and speed. And there's a lot of players in this space, but we pride ourselves on having the full suite of annotations, recording, video, screenshots, all within like a single product. So I've been with the company for 3 years. I started out as the head of marketing automation. So my focus was all our work on email, in product notifications. I was part of the very first seed round hire. So the go to market round that started sales and marketing. And so I had a lot of work to do with the sales leadership to build out some of Salesforce and
Yeah.
the alignment there. So uh, that was the initial work that I was doing. And then over time, there was a little bit of turnover on our team. The CMO left, some of our content people left, and my role expanded into sort of like an interim managing the team, which at that point I scaled up into still managing automation, email, and all those experiences, but also a broader view of content and how we can utilize it to generate demand. So that was the shift
Yeah.
of title, and have held ship until we did our fundraising, the Series A funding round at the beginning of the year, and the team is growing quickly, and it's been really exciting. It's a fun space to be in, and it's been
Yeah.
an awesome experience trying to figure out how do I generate, particularly like business demand for a product led growth company, with individual users primarily that first start coming in. So
So I think it's a fascinating career path, by the way. You started out as, in marketing, marketing operations, right? And really getting that background and using that as a path into demand generation. Um, it's funny to me that, that's happening because, like, how often do you find that a lot of the things that you need to do for your job in demand is actually reliant on your team's ability to execute on, things like, the what's happening under the hood. So maybe talk really briefly about that if you wouldn't mind. Like, I'm just fascinated by that. I think, like, what gave you the experience? Like obviously it sounds like there's a little bit of learning, on the job, but, like, how did you, like, what were the resources you used? Like, how did you come about that to get to the point where leadership had confidence in your ability to execute at a demand gen position?
yeah, for sure. I think honestly, probably like stems back. So all of like my full time marketing career outside of school has been more or less in operations, marketing, automation, that space. I actually started interning in school at Franklin Covey as like a marketing automation intern. But what that really meant was that they hadn't built out their Eloqua instance. They just purchased it. They were all they were doing were sending emails, and they didn't have anybody on the team running it, and they didn't. feel like going out and hiring like a pro to do it. They didn't really know how to build it out. So instead, they were like, well, let's get an intern to come in here and
Mm,
morph that into a full time role. So essentially, all of my non school professional experience was based on like, okay, I got to build this thing out. And I had no idea what Elico was. Like email wasn't even on my radar. I got the internship through actually like a digital career fair, um, and and so what it morphed into quickly though is as we build it out is I saw that my role was very supportive of the other functions within the team, and so at Franklin Covey at the time, we were very heavily event driven and trade show driven, and they wanted to have email programs be a primary focus too. And so our event teams, I mean, we would have these big conferences that we would run for educators, and we'd run like 20 to 25 of them every year. And the event team was so caught up in the logistics that they needed somebody to fulfill all of the digital side of executing that. And same thing with sales enablement. There was a lot of actually the sales team with like the trade shows. They kind of owned a lot of the marketing budget in that regard, and so they'd ask for a lot of collateral or they'd ask for a lot of
yeah.
processes that they wanted in place. And so I had to be supportive there too, right? So
Yeah.
as an operational component to all of this, I got to see the execution from the event side. I got to see the execution from the sales and enablement side. Um, by default with, forms and email, I saw a lot of the web property and content side on the web that I had to support. And then figure out how to bring that all together so that we could actually make something that all of the team members could execute on. I think the insight there into all the different organizations and not being totally like siloed within, say, a lot of email marketers will get pigeonholed into just email marketing. It's their job to write the copy or make the designs, and maybe they build a segment and they just got to turn that out. Mine was a much broader scope because I had to support other functions, and I think having that support allowed me to see the execution, understand the needs, and then slowly, I admittedly, it was early on in my career, so I don't think I tied the dots intentionally early on, but naturally I started to see what, what it would take to make cohesive programs work together to create demand, like what influences
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
registrations for an event, and then what am I doing within the event to like help build demand or like further, like what are people expecting in that event and how can I support them. um,
Right.
so having all of those different supportive functions allowed me to see the word I'm looking for, just kind of like you can call it
Holistic.
omni-channel or just like the full
Yeah.
experience of the buying cycle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now as a content person, that I can focus on creating demand with that sort of a foundational base.
I love that. Just the best, in my experience anyway, the best people that are doing this sort of job, either growth or demand, are actually like former entrepreneurs in some form or fashion, right? They've had a side hustle or they're working something else where they're just learning a ton of things and thinking holistically about the business, not just their silo, right? And their immediate KPI that they're measured on. And it's a unique individual, right? Which I find is sort of common in demand functions, right? Where there's just people who are, and the ones that are most successful are the ones that are thinking across the funnel, right? Through the various, they break down those silo walls and they think about, what is my marketing actually generating in terms of like SQOs and close one deals? Like, how does content flow all the way through it? How do I wire more efficiently or rewire more efficiently the way that my leads are being routed to the AEs, because not all leads are created equal, or PQLs that are coming in, like how are they treated differently, right? And so I think that's fascinating, and I've never actually seen anybody take the path that you're taking.
Yeah.
But I think it's fascinating. So So what is, I guess maybe that leads me to my next question, which is, so as a function of that, right? One of the first things that you had to do, I would think, right, is to come in and figure out like, how do I measure success, right? How do I come in and build a demand model, communicate that to my CFO? How do I think about things in terms of like how many leads that we're going to need to be able to, to hit the number that we've got? Because, you either inherited that from your predecessor or you had to build it yourself. I'm just kind of curious like how that went.
Yeah, so I feel like I've got two experiences that are somewhat diverse between Franklin Covey and here that I've had to do it twice. And I've evolved quite a bit in my thinking in both scenarios. So um, I I think we're still in a state of marketing, I feel like, where more or less the primary focus, at least the rhetoric that I see a lot of the time on LinkedIn, is that you're revenue focused, right? Like you got to be a revenue focused marketer. And that is the truth. That's what you have to do. Um, but that mentality, I feel like I've been hearing that language since honestly when I started to try and build out the Eloquent instance for Franklin Covey, right? Like, sure, there's all these other metrics that I could look at, but marketing's supposed to drive revenue. And so in the Franklin Covey scenario, what that evolved into really quickly was me essentially digesting all of the educational resources that Eloqua put together as I was trying to learn on the job about things like lead scoring and MQL models and attribution models, and trying to tie revenue to market and activities. I was all bought in on this idea of trying to tie a percentage of revenue to our symposium events and the percentage of revenue to the trade
Yep.
shows or whatever. Like they all
Yeah.
had a piece of the puzzle, and it made sense to give credit where credit was due. Um,
Right.
and I was all bought in. And it made sense too because at the time, like Franklin Covey, for example, marketing's budget was held more or less by the sales team, and partially
Yeah.
because there were such direct numbers that the sales team could say that they created, right? And marketing didn't have those direct numbers. So I think all marketing teams have this like uh, what do you call it, like the small man syndrome of like wanting to prove that we actually make an impact on the work that we're doing. And so like the only way that we can even compete to own the budget against sales is to have this revenue number. And the way that all, especially leadership, think is in like a direct attribution line. So
Yeah.
that could be regardless of the attribution model you're creating, typically it's visually presented in like a linear fashion and you distribute the revenue. And so I was all bought in on this. We actually ended up running into some Salesforce operational issues with the way they built their opportunities. That meant I couldn't do it. And so we were left with doing a lot of estimates. I left Franklin Covey with this focus, though, that like there were these multi-touch attribution models that I could implement to prove our revenue impact. And I came into CloudApp really excited to implement a new lead scoring model because everything, again, I was essentially starting from scratch and put in a new model, put in some scoring, and run with it. Over the past 3 years now that I've been here, the mindset has again broadened. And I try and look at things a little more holistically. As I began trying to implement multi touch attribution models, I put myself in the place of like I was in the meeting with the leadership team because this actually happened in Franklin Covey. Like I had put together some data and I presented it to them, and their response was like, "Well, we don't trust it. Like we really don't believe this." And so
Yep.
I put all this work into like this system and pretty like
Yep.
solid process, and it just got tossed aside. And so like as I'm putting myself in this, pretend meeting room with the executive team saying, okay, marketing drove this amount of revenue, and each program contributed this. I started to ask myself, like, okay, is this actually true? Like, are they going to believe me if I say this?
Yeah.
And I started to
And
like
how much
poke. Go ahead.
and how much are you going to uh tick off the sales leader who now has to feel like they defend themselves for the deals that
Yeah,
they are also counting so that you're not double counting those
yeah,
opportunities,
right.
right?
Like, yeah, it was almost this realization. I had started to make the realization, but I saw some post from somebody, and I don't remember. I wish I could attribute them, but it was this idea of like too often we're trying to just prove our impact rather than improve our impact. And that phrase to me just underscored the core piece of like what marketing attribution is. It had this facade of I'm trying to
Yes.
improve my impact, but really
Yes.
the underlying like foundation of it was like I'm just trying to prove I'm worth something.
Yep.
And
Yep.
recognizing that meant that I could poke holes in a lot of my own arguments. Like, who's to say, like, as I was looking at multi touch models and potentials there, I felt like it was too easy to manipulate what I wanted the data to show. Let's say I have like a full, CloudApp doesn't do this. We don't have like a lot of events and stuff. But
Mhm.
let's say you've got a team with a full suite. You've got like a full digital suite. You're running events, webinars, email. You just got the whole thing, right?
Yep.
Well, you probably have a pretty complex buying experience where there's a lot of different touch points. And
Yep.
if I was on the event team on running an event that was further down in the funnel,
Yep.
I'm going to push for my ops guy to do like a last touch or like a weighted end there. So that shows how powerful my event is.
Yeah. You got to
And
fight for that budget.
that's
Yep.
right. Like we all do it. And I don't blame anybody, right? Like
Yep.
there's no blame here. It's just the fact that like if it's manipulated like that, where the the truth isn't there and I'm
Yep.
not improving my work. And the
Yep.
whole purpose of this, you know, at least on paper, was to improve my work. So
Yep.
um, since then, at CloudApp, I do have some attribution models. I got first and last touch. Our sales cycle is really quick. There's no need for multi-touch for us. Um,
Mhm.
but so I'm not against attribution models, but I've gotten to this place where like data and models like that, they're not gospel. It's just information, and you have to recognize the fallible elements of each, and then
Yep.
like make decisions and just layer on common sense on top of it,
Yep.
which is super hard to do. It's super hard to prove.
Yep.
It's very ambiguous. Like there's no great
Yep.
answers sometimes, and I think that's what the difference. I
Yep.
mean, we want clear cut answers. Executives want
Yep.
to know that they have X
Yep.
ROI on what they put into marketing, right? That's really
Yep.
tough because the reality is the buyer's journey is not linear. It's not that specific,
Yep.
and
That's
I
right.
think we have to embrace that reality.
I love that. It's funny. Like, so my background is really on the other side of the equation, right? So I've run companies and done, I've been general manager of, a couple of companies, or parachuted in as, that type of role where I'm the one that is needing to understand how marketing budget is being allocated and how we're justifying the spend. And, asking those questions. So I do have I feel like I do have a little bit of a unique perspective in the fact that because I've been that role, I kind of know what the questions are going to be because of the questions I have, right? About how do we know that events plus the content that we're putting together plus the paid search, paid social, like how it all works together in a blend, and which aspect gets more budget or which aspect gets less budget. um I kind of feel that pain a little bit,
Yeah.
and because I just feel it. But I totally agree, right? And one of the conversations I try to have as a marketer when I put my marketing hat on is when I'm talking to a non-marketing executive is, okay, well, look, what kind of budget or sorry, let me rephrase. What kind of buying do you do? How do you do it? Right? Let's make it real personal.
Yeah.
And you ask them, like, what was the last piece of software you bought, or what was the last thing that you paid money for? And then I sort of peel back the layers, ask them like where they, like, usually it's always like, oh, well, I went to the website and I bought it. Okay, well, let's back up. Let's rewind the tape and say, well, what was the thing that caused you to have that, to take that action? Like, let's talk about that. Right. And when you start making it real for the people that are actually doing, that are making these decisions, what happens is they start shifting their mindset a little bit about, oh, well, wait a minute. So, because you can tell, like, you know, it's not just them, right? They're not doing this, in isolation. They are representative of what's happening in buying in general, right? And other buyers are doing the exact same thing. So why would our customers be any different?
Yeah.
And so you start making that, you make that connection. But I love how you talk about it, because I think that's right. It's for directional, informational purposes. It is not the single source of truth.
Yeah. I would
And
go ahead.
we
Sorry.
want so badly, or non-marketing executives want so badly for that to be like a very linear, individual buying journey. And you have to break that misconception.
Yeah. One thing I've been thinking about recently, I would love for us to kind of change the understanding of like what data based decision making is. Like I would love to evolve in like the market overall, knowing that like database decision making or database marketing or whatever isn't
Mhm.
limited to the ones and zeros that you see on your screen that come up in a report or have
Right.
some chart on them. Like there's so much, if we switch it out for knowledge or context, even all of that information can lead to really strong, that's data, and that can lead to really strong decisions. I think what you're like, uh, I've used the exact um, scenario, like questions and scenario you just brought up of like talking to non-marketing leaders with my CEO. Like on our marketing team, for example, we've hired a couple of agencies. I hired personally an agency. There were like two or three other software products we purchased. And we went through every single one, and there wasn't a single one where it was just a Google search. All
Yeah.
three agencies were referrals, right?
Yeah.
I I came across the software stuff um, because of people that I respected on LinkedIn that talked about using it. There was one
Yep.
other software purchase that we switched over because I hired somebody new and they had just had a really good product experience and just wanted to switch. And so you look at all of those and embrace that reality. Like uh, it would it would be um, it would be obviously insane to say, Google doesn't matter or search doesn't matter or whatever, but it's really just like a piece, and all of that direct response and like thinking is just a piece of it. And
Yep.
yeah, that's kind of like one of view and like attribution models. You do it more holistically. Data includes whatever you can track with the ones and zeros, but also qualitative anecdotes, stuff like that, feedback from the sales team. So you can
Yep.
really get like this view to, improve the work you do.
Yep. So I see, like, one of those data points that you have to be using is actually on your website, because I have your website pulled up and I'm looking at it. And when I click on get a demo, what I see is, how did you hear about us? So
Yep.
self-reported attribution.
Yep.
Uh, and it's so funny how some of the most basic things are actually the things that are the most powerful, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't require a lot of complexity, doesn't require you to go out and buy new software. You just add a field to the form and you look at the results.
Yep.
And so, like, in that form, like, what is that telling you? for your particular business? What are you seeing that is really important? Because um, like I can tell you, I'll let you think about that for a second because my experiment with this, I did, I think it was 1,180 of these that we pulled in a, just a quick experiment where we pulled those down, we looked at them and we said, okay, here's what, you know, our attribution tool is telling us. Here's what actual customers are telling us, and we tied those together based on the lead record, within our CRM. And I looked at it and I said, well, and it's exactly what you think it is, right? It's, oh, well, all these people are coming in through direct or they're coming in through organic or branded PPC terms. In reality, like if you look at the actual behavior that caused that first, or sorry, the last click, it's going to be things like, I heard about you on your podcast, or I heard about you on somebody else's podcast, or I heard about, the app because my colleague actually came from another company that was using your platform and we would really like to be able to, they already have experience with it and they recommended it. So we're going to check you guys out for our company. That sort of thing. And, I feel like, especially more often than not lately, it's, oh, well, I saw you guys, in LinkedIn or what have you. Right. And that's becoming a larger and larger sort of piece of the puzzle. Um, and so that was pretty awesome. My next like to go deeper with that a little bit is I'm actually going to take all of my closed won deals and all the good opportunities, right? Whether we want them or not, to be honest with you, but look at those ops and then also track those back through the life of the lead, right? To figure out like how did people hear about us, and then start connecting those dots because like I I am fascinated by this because it helps me become a better marketer, which is what I'm hearing you say, like all of everything that's underneath that's actually driving a lot of what you're saying in this podcast is really like, how do I become a better marketer? How do I do more of the things that are actually influencing my desired outcome, right? And I'm just kind of curious, like, what are you seeing with that same sort of experiment?
Yeah. I'm making a quick note because I had a thought that I want to come back to later. Okay. All right. I'd love to get kind of specific with this just because I think the context is helpful with CloudApp's execution. So I put that field in, I think in October.
Mm,
So we're at, 6 months, 7 months now. And the unique thing about us is that leading up to let's probably quite honestly even like the beginning of this year, right around like our funding round and getting some agencies on board, the primary source of all incoming traffic to the site or engagement really was search.
mm,
um, that's how people found out about us. Most of our signups would either come there was like a pretty healthy split between virality signups, meaning that like somebody's using CloudApp, they're sending videos to someone, somebody sees that video, they wonder who we are, they come and sign up, right? So there's that flow. And then there was another
yeah,
healthy bucket of I'm looking for a screen recording tool or an annotation tool,
yeah,
Google, come in. All right.
yeah.
Um, that's essentially been like the bulk of our uh, top of the funnel stuff. A lot of my work with email and whatever was very product activation focused, not like
Mm,
nurturing. And
mhm,
and so up until a few months ago, that's the extent of let's just say content that we're putting out. So it was interesting to put that in there first because I wanted to see what was driving our opportunities. There's a couple of buckets. I think you kind of mentioned it. I would. It's helpful to look at all form submissions that come through like the demo or contact us and get the answers to that. And then it's helpful to look at just those that result in qualified opportunities and what
mhm,
those answers are. Um, when you would look at the uh, full scope of form submissions. There were quite a few search values in there. People saying that they came to us through Google. When you started nailing it down to just qualified opportunities, though, 70% said either I've been a free or a user for the longest time and I love you and we're just ready for the team,
Yeah.
or somebody told me about you.
Yeah.
And we all know that word of mouth is like the nirvana of marketing. It's like somebody else is doing it for you. There's so much better authenticity and trust. And really, quite honestly, like those two, the referencing the product and word of mouth are like more or less the same thing, right? Like the only reason word of mouth happens is a overall great experience, and for us particularly
Definitely.
with the product. So those are almost the same. And then below that was search. So, anybody coming in through search was really looking for themselves. But if they were going to buy at like a real kind of level of revenue that we were looking for, it was this
Hmm.
product and word of mouth. And I was not surprised by that. But that's really influenced now the direction that we're moving forward as far as content generation and where we're spending budget. Um,
Yeah.
CloudApp there's a couple of things. CloudApp has, we've started taking an angle, at the same kind of around the same time, I started doing some research into uh, verticals, more or less personas that we wanted to tackle, because obviously with a video messaging or screen recording tool, everybody can use it. And we're on a small team. We got like 3 full-time people right now. We don't have the capacity to like market to a huge TAM. So
Yeah.
um, we've been trying to figure out how to niche down, and not from overall positioning, but just like content. And
Yeah.
so pairing that up, we found some data that is having us lean. It's not like clear cut, but we're leaning towards the customer success and support segment, whereas like some competitors of ours have focused a little more on sales and marketing use cases.
Yep.
Um, and we're really starting to uh, build an engine around content in that sphere. Content that our aim is to, uh, let's just look from the organic side right now. Like our aim from the organic is essentially to build value to earn word of mouth. We're trying to create content that is engaging, that is valuable, all of like this, the normal answers in marketing. Um,
Hmm.
that really hold the attention. It's built on the foundation of people and not brand, which I think is really important. And then, so our focus there is to really hone in on that word of mouth, because with it, we're trying to get the attention of the buyers, because most of incoming people in our database are just thinking for themselves. They're individual contributors. They just want to use something, right? They're not thinking about a team. And so, one of the actually unique challenges with our content and acquisition strategy is how do we balance going after the product led growth model, right? And getting people in, which is like a really fundamental piece, but also tackling like the people that are actually going to hold the budget and buy. There's a big
Yeah.
grid, like there's a big gap between those two. And that's a challenge that we're dealing with. I think everybody in like our space is dealing with.
Hmm.
And um, anyway, so that's kind of like how that's been our approach. And I think the bulk of that approach, like 50% of the direction for that came from, implementing that field, validating that it was the product experience and word of mouth that was really pushing the real revenue growth. And then now thinking through, okay, we knew that, or we know that now, it's pretty obvious. How can we build programs, content that facilitate that action authentically?
Yep.
And that's the challenge now that we have ahead of ourselves, uh,
Yeah.
that we got to, that we're trying to execute.
So you said you have a team of 3, and people are always sort of fascinated by like how different teams are made up.
Yeah.
Just curious, like, for for the audience, like what how do you organize your team? You said you have 3 people. What do they do? What are their roles? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So maybe in full disclosure, 3 is just the full time employees, right?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
everybody's, how you define your team is can be expanded to contractors, agencies, and whatever, right? So we have an agency that we've hired for a couple of months that helps us with demand. We've got another one that's doing a little bit of help with content. Um, we've contracted with a lot of customer success and support like leaders to write for us. They're kind of a part of our team. They're creating a ton of the content. But we have 3 full-time employees and then 1 part-time and 1 intern. And so I am the head of demand and kind of oversee the overall like content and strategy. We've got a web and SEO person, and then I have the other full time is like the content manager, and
Mm.
she's like the creative side. So she's actually executing the creation of content, working with our CS people to make sure that that works. We've got a part time social person. I view it as a distribution role.
Yep.
So it's not just like a social media manager, and that I try and like we're expanding distribution, and I'm a part of that. Like if I were to create a distribution team, I'm a part of that because I oversee email. I have an intern that helps me with email, and so
Hmm.
that's the makeup of our team. We have new leadership coming on soon to run marketing, so that'll be a 4th person soon on the team. And that's the structure for now. Who knows what the future holds, but that's the way we've structured it.
So who is responsible for creative?
Yeah, so we've got it's like a tag team effort. There's multiple. So my content person, she handles all of the writing creative. We uh, we actually use a service called Design Pickle
Yeah.
to do a bunch of our pretty quick designs and like marketing collateral that we need.
Yep.
I've been actually really happy with them. And then depending on uh, the channel and what we're running, the either an agency or like an email ourselves, we might create quick assets ourselves visually for it.
Okay.
So uh, it is still very much like a startup culture, small team feel where you need a lot of people that can do a lot of things and wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
Um, so
Got it. Okay. Yeah. No, I think just, yeah, for anybody that's listening, that's always useful. Like everybody's looking for how are other people designing their marketing teams and how are those functions being distributed across the various people. So um,
yeah,
I wanted to ask you a different question because I I I love what you said a minute ago. You said, or earlier on in the episode, you said we're in a very competitive space. The product that we have is very competitive. Um, and, my take is pretty simple, right? All products eventually, or sorry, all products really eventually mature and then those features start converging, right? So everybody's sort of in
yep,
the same space. And really the only way to differentiate yourself is through brand and storytelling and having a real point of view. So I'm kind of curious because I know you do this really well and you talk about this a lot. I'm just kind of curious, like, how do you take CloudApp in the crowded space that it's in and think about it in a way that communicates that value or that communicates that story and and allows you to be able to have a take on the world and just like have a point of view. Like how are you establishing that and then how are you sort of getting the word out about that?
yeah. Um, it's funny that you say that like you feel like I'm pretty decent at it. This has been a topic that I bring up on our team pretty consistently over the past quite a few months. I feel like um, it's a challenge. Like it's probably been one of the most interesting challenges so far in my career to figure out how we create that point of view. There's 2 angles to it too. I like when I look at like the point of view element, there's with like a product like ours, there's a world where we position ourselves of what would it be like if like our product category didn't exist, right? Like so if for and there's people like that out there that just aren't aware of like the
Mm-hmm.
speed and clarity and kind of like functionality that we provide.
Yeah.
But what we tend to find, and we've really honed that in, right? Like I feel like that messaging is really strong, and pretty obvious. And where it gets really interesting is in the competitive landscape, what is our unique
Yeah.
point of view?
Yeah.
In a product category that is quite fairly commoditized, and to your point, like features are pretty similar, how do you position yourself as something unique? Our angle so far has what's really tempting is to go direct to like a feature comparison, right? So like if I were to just go straight into feature comparison, I feel like I could do that okay.
Mm.
Like we can go to our competitors and I can talk about like, oh, they only specialize in this, or like, oh, they're a smaller player and they just do this element where like, we have a broader suite. Um, that's, in a space like ours where what's really interesting with us too is that the cost of switching in a product category like ours is much smaller than something like, say, a marketing automation system. So even in marketing and automation, where there's a bunch of players where all the features are more or less the same, the cost of switching is super high, right? And so, in an area like ours, we get quite a few deals that come into our pipeline of just folks looking for something else. Like maybe the other product they were using wasn't reliable enough,
Mm.
and if it's not reliable, they were just ready to switch.
Yeah.
And so, we are still looking to hone in on this messaging. We've done a okay, decent job of positioning ourselves as the most uh, enterprise prepared solution. So a lot of players in the space are um, pretty small, like tech startup like stuff. There's a couple big, obviously like Loom is going to be one of our biggest ones, and they've done an quite honestly, I'll just tell them, they've done an excellent job from like the video angle,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a couple others like Vidyard. Uh, and then there's like smaller level screenshot desktop tools, which we also compete with.
Yeah.
So we framed ourselves as the most prepared for enterprise. That positioning was a lot stronger probably a year ago, as we were essentially like the only solution on the market that was SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. There was like a lot of things that we could point to that we were just like, we're the best set up to meet enterprise needs. We also recognize that that might go away in the future, right? That's also kind of a feature.
Mm.
And so that's continuing to evolve, and it's something we are honestly still. I don't think we've nailed the answer yet. We're still trying to figure out that point of view. I think part of our content and positioning on the specific like customer success and support vertical might be a piece of this, because it's a little bit differentiated of a focus compared to what other people in the market are, and I feel like it's a segment that really works for us. So part of that can be part of that can influence, I think, that point of view that maybe it's the vertical that we feel like we want to support the most, and that's like the narrative that we talk about more. So it's in flux. We're talking about a lot here. It's a challenge that we feel like we want to improve on, and we'll see if we figure it out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the transparency. I mean, I think that's the interesting thing to me is that, in a space where everything feels the same and it's super crowded, like what is the way that you tell the story? And so, obviously you talk about this a lot on LinkedIn and various places where it's like, hey, you gotta lift up out of the features and even the benefits and everything else. You got to lift out and say, what is the broader macro thing that's happening right now? And is there something that's going on in specifically within that vertical? Let's say it's in CS, where that macro trend is happening, and you can sort of ride with that wave, and then have your specific take on it. And it's funny how similar that is to the exact same discussion that I'm having internally on our side. That's why I was curious about your take, because we are doing the same thing. And it's where do we fit in the world? And so on our side, we have to do it there's two different dimensions to it. There is, how do we do it internally for our own product? And then also, how do we do it within the context of the larger organization? Right.
Yeah.
And so that becomes an interesting conversation that we're literally having right now. So yeah, appreciate
Yeah.
the feedback.
What's interesting with us too, when you're talking about that point of view, when you look at like the broader things that are happening in the market, the obvious one that people would think we would want to own is remote work and asynchronous communication,
Mhm.
especially remote work, right?
Yeah.
Um, we jumped on that train early on with the pandemic and saw a pretty good boost, but uh, you look at the content out there on that topic, and at this level, it's one, been beaten to death. There's been It's been something that everybody has wanted to, well, whether they've wanted to or not, they've talked about
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and um,
People are sick and tired
and
of reading
because of
about
that, yeah, it's kind of hard to have like a unique point of view too. And
it.
so
Yeah.
like, and it's also a topic that is not does not have a long shelf life. And so what I mean, like, I don't come back to it often. Like I'm
Right.
like a remote work search or topic is something I'll look at once.
Mm.
Uh, it's not something I'm going to come back to all the time because I have a specific thing I'm trying to do, and it's
Yep.
not just remote work. And so,
Yep.
even though that kind of seems like the obvious angle, like a product like ours would want to take,
Yeah.
I've pushed back on that a little bit just because I just don't think the longevity is there. I just don't think it'll carry the weight
Yeah.
long term, and so we're finding something else.
Yeah, it doesn't bring people back for sure. I mean, in terms of, you're there to solve a specific thing, you get your information and then you moved on, but it doesn't, there's no stickiness to it, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So there was this discussion, this is a separate question, but there's this discussion where this is actually how you and I met, right? Was you had made this post on LinkedIn and you were saying, hey, you're like, I'm seeing this content from this company and I don't quite get it, right? And you did sort of a diagnosis of what you thought was happening, and it started this thread. Um, and I'm just kind of curious, like, would you mind, like, I could give the context, but I think it actually is better for you. Like, what was the context for the post? Like, what was your thinking behind it? And then maybe we can talk and dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So what stood out to me about SharpSpring's execution was it was something I didn't. It was an experience that I hadn't. I, I don't want to call it a problem. There was like an opportunity that I saw.
Right.
There was an opportunity or problem that I had never experienced before, and so it was really unique. And from as a marketer, and like if you're trying to grab attention, then you won because that totally stood out, right? So
But what was
I
it? But what was it that we were doing that stood out and
yeah.
caught your attention?
So I can't remember the timeline anymore, but at a certain point, it seemed like every first like ad within my feed in LinkedIn was a SharpSpring video, and like every time, every morning when I would get in, it was like one of your videos, and
So
I engaged with
the same video,
a
different
few of them.
video, like what was the?
They were marketing, like they were generic marketing videos, right? Like you were taught like marketing strategy conversations, content conversations.
Right. So these were different creatives, different video clips
Absolutely.
being
Yeah.
shown. It
So
was the
like
same one.
when you're thinking advertisements, right? Like it was not a direct promotion on like a product. It was purely sponsored content.
Yeah.
And every one of those was sponsored content. And so I would, they're like what we're doing here, you were repurposing podcast interviews with little sound bites that, would go back and forth on like a certain topic. With nice captions in case I didn't want to listen to it, and and stuff like that. Um, and so I consumed those, and I enjoyed a few of them, which was obvious because like LinkedIn kept showing me the ads, and um,
You're the guy who was,
some I would.
that's what it was.
Yeah, yeah, okay, that's what it is. The and I would, on some of them I enjoyed and learned something, and I kept seeing them. This went on for like 3 months,
Right.
and it was at that time that I was getting to the point where I was like, I have seen so many SharpSpring ads. Like,
Yep.
what in the world do they do?
Right.
And
You're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
yeah, I was like, when are they gonna like
Yeah.
pitch me?
Right.
And and then I just like immediately like asking myself that question, I realized like, holy cow, like I've seen all these sponsored posts. Like I actually don't know what they do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna dive in and figure out like their whole execution.
Right.
So I remember going to like the LinkedIn page for SharpSpring, going to see just their ads, and I was scrolling through every ad. I was like, okay, yeah, I remember some of these. I was going through every one. It was a sponsored post, sponsored post, sponsored post, sponsored post.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, like this is why I don't know who they are. Like I've engaged. It never actually got to the point where I think I followed. Maybe it's because I knew it would always be there. I don't know. Um, but it was just purely value based content.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was at a point that, like if I was going to make a buyer's decision on that product category, SharpSpring wouldn't be in the conversation because I didn't know, I couldn't tie the dots.
Yeah.
So my critique or whatever was like, in most marketing worlds, the product advertisement, and whatever is what you see 95% of the time.
Yep.
And I was surprised by the consistency and probably, quite honestly, the discipline that your team had in promoting just value-based content.
Yeah.
And then I'm finding myself in this gap of like, okay, they've built some decent trust. They need to tell me what they do, right? Like somehow they need to put it in within their experience that like, the targeting might not be quite this sophisticated, but if I've seen 5 or 6 value-based ads, it's okay to tell me what you do.
Yeah.
So that I can start connecting the dots. And so it was just this really fascinating case study where I had been given a lot of value and no direct product, or let's just say problem.
Yeah.
That like the range of I found like the range of value-based content that you promoted, at least in my mind's eye, wasn't on like a specific even like element of marketing, so I couldn't tie the dots that way.
Yeah.
So I would need some like more direct product advertising or problem-based advertising for me to start doing that. And so it was a fun case study to kind of write up.
Yeah. So I remember us exchanging conversation back and forth, actually in that thread where we were talking about it. And one of the things that I said was, well, I'm a consumer of a lot of this content. And one of the things that I am trying to do is create a brand that is focused on helping marketers solve some of those critical pain points that we know that they have that are in our ICP, and doing it in such a way that isn't going to hit you over the head, with a get a demo every 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
That's what everybody does. And I think one of the things that I said is like, we've probably, over rotated maybe too much on that side of the spectrum where we've said, or, back then anyway, especially, was like, I didn't want to come out of the gate because, needless to say, like we're very aggressive in terms of like the content we're putting out and that sort of thing. But, we didn't want to do it in such a way that we were linking that with a demo request, poor experience for everybody that's out there. Right. And so we were purposefully and very intentionally, and I love that you use the word discipline, because you're absolutely right. There's a certain level of discipline involved in just making sure that that's what we're doing, right? We're talking about those pain points. We talk about those pain points in different ways, and we hit on those. And then, over time, what we've been doing, as you've probably seen, is we've been layering in um, content that does tie back to sort of problem solution, right? And again, just not wanting to be yet one more company that's polluting somebody's feed with a subpar experience, right? It's just, look, we're going to deliver some value. We hope it's going to be helpful, and we're going to do that over time, and we're going to build
Yep.
this as a thing. And so what I'm seeing in our own numbers and what I'm seeing in our own metrics is actually the right thing, right? We're seeing, you know, like for example, our homepage specifically is becoming a larger and larger piece of the overall puzzle because of, percentage of traffic, et cetera, because people are literally just typing in the brand, which is
Yep.
fantastic, right?
That's my exact experience, right? Like that's what I had to do to look at see what you did.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing that we are still working on, needless to say, is like we need to connect really like a lot better the value, the story, get out of the features comparison game, right? And then build that. So that's one of the things that we're working on as a team is really building those pieces into the site experience, and that'll be soon. But I just loved your feedback, and I've been watching your stuff probably ever since, just in terms of the content you've been putting out. So appreciate the feedback and critique.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So last question, and we got like maybe a couple minutes. So I always like to ask this question because it's super interesting, I think, for the audience. Like it's something that most people talk about or ask about. So what is the particular martech stack or series of tools that you use within your day-to-day job? Like what does your team use?
Yeah. So Salesforce is our CRM. I'm in there a lot. For marketing automation, we use something called Customer IO. Um, that's the bulk of our emailing and product-led growth motion. And it's not your typical like uh, marketing automation platform with like landing pages and all of the full suite, lead scoring model, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I've actually loved it though. It's particularly strong for like product-led growth SaaS companies.
Segmentation
Um,
and yeah.
yeah, yeah, and we've had like a HubSpot instance to do some other stuff, but
Mhm.
Customer IO has been it. We, as far as other tools we use, our our site's built on WordPress. We use normal stuff like Google Analytics and all of the ad platforms. Right now, we're just doing it within like native um, ad platform stuff with our agency.
Mhm.
Uh, we use for social right now Sked Social.
Mhm.
Um, we've actually brought on Shield Analytics for LinkedIn for our team. We have something going on our team to try and like employee advocacy type stuff.
Yep.
It's more of like enablement to be online and social. So we use Shield to measure the impact there. And then I have a couple of personal tools, like for my personal content on LinkedIn, I use Hype Fury right now for Twitter as well.
Mhm.
And let's see if there's anything else.
You
I help the sales team a lot with outreach, right? So I'm doing a lot of like sales enablement and helping with copy for their emails and sequences that they have together.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of like the main structure. So
that's cool.
yeah,
And then how do you use your own product? Do you use it for any kind of sales enablement? Like, do you do?
yeah, yeah. That's funny. I didn't actually bring that one up. That's I need to slap my hand after this because that's pretty bad. We use CloudApp internally a ton. So me personally, I'm creating between 70 and 80 videos and screenshots a week.
Wow.
Um, and probably 40% of those are videos.
Mhm.
Our marketing team meeting is asynchronous every other week. So we we have a meeting, but we're just sending videos
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah.
Um, which has been great. That goes for our all hands too for the team. Our all hands for the whole company alternates a synchronous event with an asynchronous update meeting. And then I'm constantly using it for all of like the use cases we would in marketing: direct feedback, quick sharing of files, um, giving feedback with like video responses, and then like when I'm doing external communications, I tend to use like the full suite to like show the use case and like features of what it can do. So I'm usually sending video whenever I'm responding to either support tickets or people outside. I try and use CloudApp just to showcase the value, which is why I get up to that, like 80, sometimes over 100 mark per week.
That's crazy. Yeah. So I think, just the fact that, you know, the, the way that you're using that like in your own day to day, it speaks pretty highly of, your faith in the product, right? I mean, there's so many people that I watch that are in SaaS, they have some sort of key piece of software that they develop that they don't actually use. They're not drinking their own champagne, right? They're not eating
Yeah.
dog food or whatever, right? And
Yep.
I'm a huge proponent of that internally. Like we have to be using the thing. Otherwise, like how do we know the customer? How do we know what those pain points are? How do we know how to provide that feedback loop that makes its way back into product? It's like it's really critical, and it's interesting to see how you're using it. So
Yeah, the dev team actually loves me, and it's a little bit painful because they have me on like the alpha or beta versions all the time because they know I use it so much, and so I'm the one that gives like the real quick
yeah, yeah.
product feedback on like things they missed or whatever. So
No, that's awesome. I think I mean, but that's exactly what you need, right?
yep.
Is they need that, you need that, and that alignment that you guys, that it feels like you guys are having like across the organization is really interesting. Not a lot of organizations like, well, like we talked about before, right? There's a lot of siloed behavior, and
For sure.
just having like maintaining that startup mentality, even if you as you grow, right, you move into a Series B or beyond, you still want to sort of maintain that for as long as you can, because that's what
Yeah.
allows you to iterate so quickly.
Yep.
But I love that DNA in the organization. That's pretty cool. So, Michael, thanks for joining me. I really do appreciate this. I know all the people that are listening are going to have a ton of value that's going to come out of it. There's going to be a lot of questions. How do people get a hold of you? Like if they want to chat with you or follow you or however.
Yep. I think the best place is LinkedIn. My URL handle is Roberts Italia. Comes from a church mission that I served in Italy, actually. And so, but find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'm there all the time, every morning. I try to respond to anybody who's not spam or trying to, just direct sell me to something. So
That's awesome.
find me there.
Awesome. Michael, appreciate it. Have a good one.